Welcome back to another episode of the Digital Drive-In Podcast, where we talk about the universal greatest movies ever made. No, bar none, of course. This is not an opinion. This is the objective truth, and also why we like them. My name is Alex, and I'm
Smooth.
of course joined by my cult leader co-host Garrett DiNardo. Hello.
Hello.
Kalima. Wait, what did Jehovah's Witnesses say?
What do they say? Don't do that. Put the fun back in the bag.
No birthdays, no Christmas. And of course, we talk about our favorite movies, like I said, on this podcast. But this is all opinion based, isn't it, Garrett? What movie are we talking about today?
Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Wow. This is the 5th Indiana Jones movie.
Technically, it's the first.
Technically, but it is, of course, the sequel to Indiana Jones, Return of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, right, Garrett?
The prequel.
But it was
because
released
it happens
after
a year
it.
before.
What?
Jeez, that George Lucas.
Nobody can have that many adventures back to back. It's impossible.
Well, didn't he say specifically he wanted to do that to avoid bringing in Nazis as the villain once again?
He did, yes. And then he just did it again. He brought Nazis back for the Last Crusade.
Yeah, because they were the most popular and made all the money.
Yeah. But what is Temple of Doom? Garrett.
What? It's an Indiana Jones movie. It's the adventures that we couldn't fit in the first movie. It's a way for Steven Spielberg to find girlfriends. Have you ever seen Audition?
I have.
Okay, this is basically Steven Spielberg's Audition. And what happened was he actually died right after Jurassic Park Schindler's List came out because of it, and it's been a replacement director ever since, and that's why he's so different.
It's like Paul McCartney. So
yes.
That's why his films have turned into like hack fraud stuff since then. Got it.
He's trying to be all serious and not as wonderful as his earlier films. Yep.
Sure. But this is one of his earlier films, right, Garrett?
It is.
And of course, we talked about Raiders of the Lost Ark in our very first episode ever, didn't we? It was quite the adventure and quite a long time ago. 20 episodes ago. We're at episode 20 now. Isn't that fun and exciting?
That is exciting.
It's not. I hate it. We're done now. This is the last episode ever. Wah wah. It's not though. I'm sorry I lied to everybody. But it's a nice little fun thing, isn't it? That we did an Indiana Jones film at number 1 and now at number 20. And maybe at number 40 we'll do Last Crusade, I guess.
And then at number 60 we'll kill ourselves.
I like that one. Anyway. You would. No, that's what I was expecting your response to be, but you didn't say it.
Aww.
So this is the second film in the franchise, but as Garrett alluded to, actually said explicitly, he didn't allude to, this is a prequel. It takes place 1 year before Raiders of the Lost Ark.
1935!
Yep. But does the film, or what's the purpose of it being a prequel, other than the Nazi thing? What does it allow for Spielberg to do, you think? Why do you think he decided to do it, other than Nazis, or do you think that was the only reason? Or do you think he even cared? Because not a lot of people, I think, know that this is actually a prequel.
That seems to be more of a George Lucas thing as like decision making. I really think you could have the story be anything and Spielberg would be happy for it.
Right.
Probably some of it was like where they could get permission to shoot and like what they wanted the budget to be was probably some of it.
Okay.
It seems like I remember hearing that Lucas was already trying to like push like an Alien storyline, and Spielberg didn't want to do that because he had already done multiple Alien films. And right. I don't mean the the Xenomorph franchise Alien, but creatures not from this planet.
Ridley Scott. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured as much. Or Border Crossing, neither of those.
That's Indiana Jones 5, The Wall. That's what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
About Trump's wall.
Baron Trump and the gigantic wall. So it doesn't really tell you anything new about the character.
Yeah, but does it need to? And at the same time, it almost allows for them to not have to maintain any development from Raiders, right? They don't have to like keep up with the Marion stuff or anything like that by making it a prequel. They can just kind of go ham and whatever.
Yeah, but of course that brings up a lot of questions. You know, it's like, why go back in time? Like the one of the earlier scenes, just kind of jumping into the film, has like a guy that's supposedly like Indy's right hand man gets killed, but we don't feel anything for it because this is the first time we've ever seen this guy before.
Right.
He's like in the movie for 30 seconds and dies, and you're like, oh, okay. I mean, there's no Brody. There's not there's no scenes at all of him in the classroom. There's no scenes at all of him in the US.
Right.
There's really not very much globetrotting either. It has like one, interlude of like them showing the airplane going from one location to another, and then like they stay in that location the entire time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not as adventurous almost. Well, worldwide adventurous as the first film is.
Right. A lot of it is indoors. There's only a few matte paintings in this one. There's not a twist, interesting ending.
Mm-hmm. But in that case, it's a lot different than Raiders in its story, though. It's not just the same thing over and over again.
I would say that is one of the things about this film that is different from especially a lot of the sequels in the 80s, is it was supposed to be you do the exact same thing but bigger and better. More explosions, more budget. But this kind of like pared it down, did it a little more simply, and told a different story. So it's interesting that they chose to go that way.
It's almost like they just figured if they kept the character kind of the same, they could tell whatever kind of story they wanted around that character. They could change the world and the style of events, but as long as they kept Indy consistent, that maybe they figured people would be able to work with it and kind of not care that it was just the same movie. Or not.
I think that's fair. I think that the mythology of the thing that Indy was searching for isn't as interesting as the first or third movies.
Sure.
But I mean, it could just be that I know more about Christian mythology than I do others, even though this isn't like a straight mythological thing. It's more of like a combination of a couple different legends. But
right.
So in that aspect, I think what he is searching for isn't as interesting as the first or third or even the fourth film.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically, other than knowing that they're glowing rocks and like in proximity to each other, they do something. That's about all I know, even after watching the film multiple times.
Right. There's really no lore behind them or anything. They don't do any explanation.
Yeah, I mean, because it's not like the military or the museum came to him and they said, we really want this specific artifact. It's just like, they go to a village and they're like, everything in this village is terrible. Could you go and get the rock for us and bring it back because it got stolen? Like, that's the...
Maybe they should.
Like, yeah, okay,
maybe
sure.
They should have had done the museum thing instead. Or do you think that it works in this case?
I think it works some, but I think the motivation for peril is balanced on why they're doing it, and having basically no monetary benefit for Indy. He's only doing it to help other people. While that's that's like a nice story, it doesn't really drive or motivate me. I'm cheering him on because it's Indy, not because I like his quest.
Right. It kind of like he just stumbles into the story rather than being pulled into a world.
Right. Yeah, because it was like all accidents, basically.
It feels like a side quest.
Mm-hmm.
And like he shows up and then like a question mark appears over the elder's head. Get our rock back.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's not part of the main quest. It's just a side thing. Collect 3 rocks.
Yeah, basically. But do you think that that's executed well then, even though it's kind of wildly different than the original? Because I think
I think it is. It's one of those where like maybe the less you pay attention to it, the less regard you have for it.
Right.
But it's like, as classic as the first one is, I don't have that same feel towards it. There's things that as it's progressing in the story, it like sticks out to me and kind of bothers me a little bit. Whereas like in Jurassic Park, there's that spot where it's like there's obviously flat land that the T-Rex is walking on, and then suddenly there's a huge drop off, and it's like my brain goes, hey, why was there a drop off? But it like, because the story and the characters are so engaging, it's like, well, it doesn't really matter. I'm just engaged in the story.
Sure.
And so I don't keep thinking about it. Even though I notice it, I don't keep thinking about it. Whereas in this, I notice it and it takes me out of the movie and I start to think about it and I start to think of the reasons why rather than being to push it off and just go with the story.
Yeah, fair enough. But I think that this is a better Spielberg sequel than The Lost World is,
I agree.
in that I think it, while I agree with you on what you said, I do think also it maintains that sense of fun and adventure still from the first one, but it adds a little bit of a darker edge to it. And I'm not sure, did this come out after? This came out after Empire, right?
Yeah, it did.
So perhaps, do you think maybe they were riding off of the coattails of that? Because Empire is a much darker film than Star Wars is, and then Temple of Doom is a much darker film than Raiders is. Do you think that maybe they were banking off of that and how people responded to a dark tone in Empire when they're going ahead and making a darker tone for this one?
I mean, I can see that. And it's like, Lucas, like THX 1138 is kind of a darker film too.
Yeah,
So I could see him like going back to that well and using that as a way to tell more stories because THX 1138 was originally a short that he turned into a film, so it's technically a sequel.
sure.
So it's like I could see him doing that, but it's weird the way it's directed and how many like slapstick things and crazy characters are in it. I think
Mhm.
actually diminish the fact that it is a darker film at heart.
Sure. Maybe that. Do you think maybe that's Spielberg now, and he didn't want to go full in on the darkness? He still wanted to maintain a sense of fun because that's kind of what he was known for at this point.
I agree.
So
And
maybe
I think
he.
that's why it doesn't feel as congruent throughout the whole
Sure.
film. It feels like two different people kind of fighting against what they want the characterization of the film to be.
It almost looks like Raiders was a full Spielberg film as much as it could be. This is a little more Lucasy. Last Crusade is maybe a little back to Spielbergy, and then number 4 is back again to Lucas influence.
It seems that way, at least at first glance. Yeah.
Because like while Spielberg works a lot with kids, Short Round feels a lot like a Lucas character does, like a straight one. I know you drew comparisons to a certain Gungan at some point.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to take some of the dialogue and put it in Phantom Menace and have Jar Jar say it, it would fit.
But I like Shorty much more than I like Jar Jar. I don't know what it is.
And that's fair. That's completely fair. But it's just like as I was hearing some of the dialogue, I'm like, oh my god, this is prequel level bad.
Sure. I mean, he didn't write the scripts at least, but Lawrence Kasdan also didn't as well, who I think really has a lot to do with Raiders' success. He's an excellent screenwriter.
Right, but the two people that did write the screenplay from the Lucas story are two people that Lucas worked with like fundamentally with like American Graffiti and
Okay.
a couple of other of his films. So it's like hand-picked people that worked for him.
Sure. So it's weird because it's got all the same pieces in all the same places, but it just doesn't fall together as neatly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Age of Ultron, I guess. I think that's what I wrote about it when I watched it recently. Was that it has all the same pieces as the first film, but it doesn't come together as nicely. That one's a little worse than this is, though. But
And some of the blue screen effects and the rear projection is really really bad. It
really
aged
dated, yeah.
terribly. Yeah.
Shorty falling through the bridge was the one that I noticed. When the shot of his legs looks really bad, but it's still kind of fun. What do you
And
think
when they're
of,
doing the close-ups on the yellow blow up boat,
Sure, yeah,
that looked bad. Like if they just would have kept it further away and had the actual stunt people, that's fine. But when they actually have to show the actors, it looks terrible.
yeah. What do you think of the cult as a bad guy instead of the Nazis?
Well, I mean, the one guy doesn't show up until like an hour into the film.
Sure.
So
Meanwhile,
you
like
kind
Bellic
of
is in the first scene of Raiders, right?
yeah, you don't really have anybody to root against. You're just kind of like, oh, I'm seeing what is happening with Indiana Jones, and then it's like by the time the actual main story gets started, you're like, wow, it's been a long time until this.
I don't even know what the bad guy is, what his name is.
Yeah, does he say?
His name's not Kali Ma, even though that's what he says.
Right, but that's
it
what
almost would have
everybody.
been better, I think, if they had a mystery aspect to it, wouldn't it? Like once he gets to Pancot Palace, maybe have the high priest character be somebody working in the palace, so that when his reveal happens, you're like, oh, he's the cult guy, rather than, oh, that's the cult guy. When he shows up, you're like, oh, there he is.
Yeah, it's like they could have actually had like Indy and the girl crash and short round crash and be at the temple with and talking with the king instead of talking with like the guy at the village.
Okay.
And the king could have said, I will give you all of this treasure if you find this very special religious rock for me.
Sure.
And then later we find out that the king is under mind control and he's actually part of the cult. And it's like that would tie everything together and you could kind of like push away that whole first part of it.
Yeah. And then maybe at the end, you have Indy kind of decide if he wants to give the rock, or if he wants the fortune and glory, or if he wants to be a good person
Right.
by giving it back to the people.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
You know, knowing, well, if this falls into the wrong hands again, you know,
Yeah.
I should be the white guy and save all of these people from this magic that they don't know anything about.
Right.
You know, that would be an interesting way of doing it and showing what kind of character he is and why this being a prequel would make sense as to like maybe why he was pure or like wasn't destroyed by the stuff in the arc
Sure.
because
Speaking
of the
of
decisions
that, though,
he would make. Yeah.
I do kind of like how when he and Willie are in the like the tent with one of the leaders of the village. I don't know what to call things, but I like how Indy's very kind of respectful of, like, he understands the culture and all of that, while you have Willie kind of being very disrespectful of it. But I kind of like how they showed Indy is well versed in his world knowledge, as if he had maybe been to somewhere like that place before, or even in the area before. Because he seems to even have a general knowledge about Pancot Palace and about the rocks in general, and have a general sense of what their ideas are and what the
Mhm.
rocks can do, even if he might not necessarily believe it. But
Right.
what's really bizarre to me, actually, off of that, is how much, like, he in Raiders he doesn't believe in something like the Ark, or in Last Crusade he doesn't believe in the Holy Grail, yet he like says words to turn the rock super hot. Like, he uses magic at the end of this movie.
Yeah.
Why doesn't he believe in those other artifacts if he knows for a fact that he can conjure magic just by saying certain words around that rock, right?
Yeah. I agree that that's not, I mean, it's like some people have said that like maybe he didn't remember all the stuff that was going on because he was under a trance or whatever, but
Sure.
that part of it, he's outside of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's little things like that to me that make this lower in my opinion than the other than
Sure.
number 1 and number 3. Not to say that it's a bad movie, it's just like compared to like 2 of the greatest adventure films of all time, this
Sure.
one is a bit of a letdown. But it's like it's still a character I really like. It's basically like a lesser effort James Bond film. You can still have a
Sure.
lot of fun with it. It's still worth watching. I still watch it multiple times. I still own it. But it's not like I don't get as excited and I'm not as drawn into the world as I am with at least the first and third.
It's kind of like Return of the Jedi in a sense, where it stands up against 2 other of the greatest films in its genre, and it's still very good. But in order to stand toe to toe with those other 2 films, it needs to be great or near perfect. And it just has a couple of things that don't even hurt the film, but a couple of things that make it just a little bit lesser than the 2 other ones that are beside it.
Exactly. And it also just goes to show that George Lucas wasn't perfect in his filmmaking and made questionable decisions and questionable characters, and this isn't a new thing that happened during the 90s.
Well, you could even say that in the first Star Wars is a little silly and all of that. There's
Sure.
legends on how the first Star Wars was saved in the editing room, right?
Yeah, I mean the entire idea of the journey of the Wills
Right.
is silly.
Silly.
Yeah.
But, I think well, he even directed the first one. Like, it must have been saved in the editing room, because then if you see the next one, he's a good story writer, George Lucas. Like, when he writes general beats and then has an excellent screenwriter like Kasdan in both Empire and in Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think it's somebody that can take the general story structure and elevate it. And then once you pair it with a great director as well, like Steven Spielberg, I guess that's probably what makes Raiders of the Lost Ark one of the greatest films ever, is you have a solid team building from it. But I think once you lose integral parts of that team, it becomes a little bit lesser.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Is it was George Lucas's wife that edited the first movie,
Right.
that
Star Wars, yeah.
edited Star Wars. And I think both he and Spielberg were going through or had gone through divorces at this point in their career.
Right.
So it may have been why they had more of a darker outlook on their films as well.
Sure. But again, like I said, it's not to say this is a bad movie. I agree with you. Like, I
Sure.
love the movie still. We both still rated it 4 stars out of 5. Like, I'm proud to own it. I do watch it regularly. Like, it's not as much as Raiders, but if I'm doing a marathon of Indiana Jones films, I don't exclude it. Like, if I watch Jurassic Park marathon, I just watch Jurassic Park and only that one. Like, it's still a worthy sequel. I think it stands up with it, even if it's just a little lower. But I think something that keeps it up and elevated at almost the same level as the other ones is some of the set pieces in it are awesome. You agree?
Yeah, especially the minecart
Yeah.
sequence. I mean, it's like basically once they introduce the villain all the way to the end of the film, it is more the adventure thing that you were expecting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you were talking about especially the minecart sequence is wildly fun. It's hilarious. It's awesome. It's exciting. It's feels like right out of Raiders, doesn't it?
Because it was.
I was queued you up for it if you wanted to.
Yeah, well, it's just in the original notes that they have of Spielberg, Lucas, and I want to say maybe it was Frank Marshall, the producer.
Sure.
They were talking about all the things that they could actually put into this film, into Raiders of the Lost Ark, and some of the things that were mentioned that they wanted to had to be cut because of either budget or like the time that they had to film, or it was just too much of a bloated screenplay. And so when Indy had hitched a ride on the submarine and Raiders to go to the island of where they were going to open up the ark and take a look at it. That was supposed to have an entire minecart sequence going to that spot, but they cut that out and they decided to use it in this film. But as one of the things too, I mean the special effects and the lighting are really fun. The way that it is paced and edited is really good, and I love the sound effects. Ben Burt just does a fantastic job with all these
Yeah,
neat
as
little
always.
ways of sounds. Yeah,
As
he's
always,
just so
Ben Bird
good.
is probably one of the greatest sound engineers and designers ever, I think. If not the
Oh,
greatest.
I'd agree.
Certainly the most iconic. Your Star Wars sounds wouldn't be anywhere without him, right?
Yeah,
Does it do most Spielberg
it
stuff? Like, did he do Back to the
it seems
Future?
like it. Yeah, I mean, because it's like this whole Skywalker sound thing is basically him
Mhm.
at the helm of it,
Yeah. So, I mean, he voiced Wally too.
right?
Yeah, Ben Burt's probably the greatest, or at least my favorite sound designer. He basically created the sounds for a lot of stuff that was my childhood. So,
What
but I
about
totally
the?
agree. It's so awesome the
Oh,
sound
sorry.
design in this.
What about the Kubrick connection?
The Rainbow Connection.
Well, Garrett Brown, who is the Steadicam operator for The
Yeah.
Shining,
Uh-huh.
did some of the camera work in this film. He was one of the operators.
Really?
Uh, the guy, the in the first movie, the big German shirtless bald guy that fights
Uh-huh.
Indy is also in this one as a red bearded. Uh, I don't know if it's Sri Lankan or what culture this is supposed to be. I mean, because it's not
Okay.
really Indian,
Well,
but I
he's one
guess
of the
maybe it's supposed
thuggy
to be Indian.
guys, right?
Yeah, he was one of the thuggies.
Which one?
The really big guy with the red beard.
The guy that falls into the steamroller?
Yeah,
Holy shit!
that's
Is he
the
in the
same
third
guy.
one? Is he in the
I
third
don't
one?
remember. He
Dude,
probably is.
that was what I was talking about. When I was watching it, I messaged you and I said I like how there's a big glory kill in each movie. And I went the plane in the first one, the steamroller in this. Does he have a death in the third one that is also because that's
I
a fun
can't
little
remember.
running gag. If so, the same guy just gets
But
killed in an absurd, gory way in all 3 films.
yeah.
Huh.
So this actor was also in Barry Lyndon, and he
Mhm.
was actually in a fighting scene with Barry
Oh
Lyndon.
yeah.
And then we talked about how the general was
Mhm.
Philip Stone, who was in Shining, and Barry Lyndon in A Clockwork Orange.
Right.
So
In The
it's
Shining,
like,
for anybody, because we did do an episode on The Shining, he's the guy in the bathroom that talks to Jack about the former person that murdered him or whatever, but also said that there was no former person.
yeah, he's Grady.
Yeah, I didn't know the name. I forgot.
Well, one time they say Delbert Grady, and another time they say Charles Grady. So
Yes.
we have to figure out.
We did an entire
if any-
podcast
yeah.
on this movie already. We don't have to do another one. But we can.
So anyway, I just think it's fun that Spielberg used guys that Kubrick had used. So that's
Yeah,
one of the
that's
neat things about
interesting.
watching. Is like, hey, I know that guy.
I know him. I clapped.
I did.
Did you?
No, I actually didn't.
But speaking of them, I
I-
guess, what about some of the other characters in this movie? Because we already talked about the general.
I
and
do
all of
not
that.
like the lady.
You do not like the lady to the point where he won't even say her name, actress or character. But Kate Capshaw plays Willie. I don't even know her last name.
Yes.
I just call her Willie Nelson. I think that's what her last name is. You mean you don't like her and her incessant screaming?
No, she's annoying.
But isn't that the point?
I don't know. It like
Because Indy's
having an
very
annoying
annoyed
character
with her frequently. Like to the point where doesn't he say at one point, like, yeah, Willie, shut up. When they're dying, when they're about to die and they get crushed by the thing, and she's like making a bunch of weird noises and screaming. He just goes, shut up, Willie. It made me laugh.
I don't know if there's a movie that I love that has a main character that is super annoying. I'm trying to think if there is.
So it always detracts when there's a character that's intentionally annoying.
Yeah, like I don't know how I've ever been like, I'm so glad that character is annoying. That just made the movie.
She certainly doesn't stand up to Karen Allen in the first one.
No.
Well, you have a strong female character, right? That stands toe to toe with Indy on a lot of stuff versus this, who's almost like a sexualized damsel in distress sometimes.
Yeah, and that maybe that's some of the thing too. Is like my favorite genre basically is noir, which the femme fatale. It's like a woman that can not only stand up for herself and doesn't get used by men, but is actually using men and can
Right.
get what she wants. It's like I like those powerful female
kind
characters.
of what Marion is, right?
Right.
Versus this.
Right. Well, she's able to drink the guy under the table and like punch Nazis. What a great character, and it's the same thing like Game of Thrones. We were talking about that earlier this week. It's like there's a lot of strong female characters,
Yeah,
so
most of them I would say are stronger than the male characters in Game of Thrones.
Right.
So
but it's not like every movie has to have that. It's like I understand like mentally she's really strong, but she can't fight the same way that Superman can. So it's like I understand that. So I'm not saying like everyone has to. It's unrealistic for everyone to be completely powerful and all be the exact same. But it's just this lady is so annoying. It's like I don't want to hang around her. Why would Indiana Jones want to hang around her?
You mean you don't like their playful sexual banter when they're talking about nocturnal activities?
That's so stupid.
What about the part where he like barges into the room and is like really looks aggressive and all that, and he starts like trying to find another thuggy in her room or whatever? I love this part with just the line where he opens the door and she goes, "Oh, Indy," and then he's got like the death glare on and he starts moving quickly and she's like, "Oh, be gentle with me." I laughed hard. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that's fine. Like if they just would have had her like really girly, would have been fine. Like where he's like feeling around on the female statue to figure out what the latch for the opening is, and she's like, "I'm over here." Okay, like that's fine. I'm okay because she's not being.
You're fine with sexualizing jokes and sexualizing women overtly.
Well, it's like because she wanted it. It was. Indy wasn't being forceful on her. It's like she really was attracted to Indy, but she wanted him to show enough effort. I mean, that's like James Bond when he sits down on the chair and the girl's in the bathtub and she's like, "Give me something to wear," and he hands her a pair of shoes. That's fucking hilarious.
But how about in Spectre when like he kills her husband and then goes up and he's like, "I'm gonna fuck the shit out of her," and she's like, "I'm mourning," and he's like, "I don't give a fuck." And then he like creeps up on her in the shower. Remember that, Inspector?
Yeah, it's like
James Bond is awful.
You can do things to fill out a character without saying, "Hey, I as the filmmaker think everyone should treat people this way."
Right.
It's like I'm okay with that. I'm okay with them saying, "Hey, this is the 30s. Things are different," or "Hey, these two people like each other." I mean, it's like screwball comedies or romantic comedies. That you can do that all the time. You can play with those things. But I don't want to just see a movie with morons. Okay. Even if it's a comedy. I don't know. Right. I mean, like Dumb and Dumber, it kind of works when you're laughing at them, kind of.
Yeah.
But it's a very fine line. I think the filmmaker has to show that he's smarter than what it is that he's talking about.
Yeah, and especially once you find out like Spielberg ended up getting with Kate Capshaw as well, it all seems a little weird how sexualized she is in the movie because I don't know when they got together, but was it during the movie, after the movie?
I'm not sure.
Because it's kind of some of the stuff is a little weird if it was like during the movie or after the movie. He made her do or say or act in a certain way because he was like playing to his fetish or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, because then it's almost like nepotism. It's like the
yeah.
only reason why she's playing that character is because he wants to bang her.
Yes, exactly. Which I would hope not, but I don't think Spielberg is that kind of person. It's not really evident in any of his other movies, but he wasn't with any of his other female leads in any other movie. But
Because
I do
she
agree with
doesn't
you. She is
really,
too annoying though.
and she doesn't really have any chemistry with Harrison Ford either.
No, not particularly. Not as much as
Or
Karen Allen did.
right, and it's like for whatever you can say about Short Round, it actually seems like Short Round and Indy would hang out together.
Oh yeah. That's why I love them, is I think their chemistry is fantastic with each other. Indy and
So it's
Shorty.
kind of like you don't really need two.
Sure.
He has a sidekick. He has someone hanging around him. You don't need the girl. Now, if Indy found the girl or the girl was already at the place and she took a liking to him because he was different from everyone, I would be okay with that. But for her following him around from the very first musical note of the film, it was
I
too
love
much
that.
at that point.
Yeah, I know you don't, but it's hilarious. I love that song. Anything Goes. I love John Williams' arrangement of it. I think is why I like it. I don't really care about her singing it, but it's like during the action when it goes
Right.
back into playing it again. When like the action starts and it's and you're like, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, it was him trying to be his oh fuck, what's his name?
Well, you're
He
good.
was trying to be Bogart at that point.
I can see that. I mean, I just think of Lego Indiana Jones whenever I think of the action set pieces in this movie. more
Lego
so
Indiana
than
Jones is probably the best Indiana Jones.
yeah, well, it's the best. It's the best of the Lego games, I think, too.
Yeah, I
But
love that game.
yeah,
Especially the
more so than Raiders. I think of this film and its action sequences as their Lego Indiana Jones counterparts, like the mine in the mine when they're fighting like the Redbeard guy. I think I thought of the layout of that sort of level while they were fighting the guy in this movie, and I remembered it vividly. Or even at that point, at the with the Anything Goes kind of get the diamond little battle scene too. I was thinking of that kind of stuff as well. It's hilarious.
I always hear that block sound effect where they're like the little pieces kind of fall out.
Every time somebody gets killed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Somebody needs to edit that on YouTube.
It would be so good. No ticket.
That's the thing. I don't think there's many funny lines in this one.
No. Well, it's because it's darker. It's not as fun as Raiders and Crusade are. Those ones are like pure-hearted adventure. Like they don't take themselves very seriously. Not as much as this one does. This one is like, it feels drastically different to the other two in tone completely, which I think takes away from some of the possibility to have any funny one-liners and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like, I mean, Harrison Ford got ripped for this role.
Fuck, right? That's probably why he
So
was shirtless for some of the stuff. Is
I would imagine
like the scene at the end when he's on the bridge. Now I'm straight, but damn, he's old now though. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, right? He's fucking jacked. He's jacked.
he is.
But how good of a set piece is that bridge part too?
The bridge part is amazing, you know.
Uh-huh.
And it's like even at points when you can tell like that they're like dummies or mechanical things that are falling off, it's still because of the fact that they're actually using something physical, it still like really hits home like how big and how spacious and how far down all that is.
Or like they probably just threw bloody chunks of like beef in the water with some clothes for the alligators or crocodiles.
Yeah,
I love how there's the one crocodile that death rolls like 50 times.
Yeah, it's too fast. They actually
Yeah.
sped it up, which is unfortunate. But it's funny because I saw that they actually filmed the alligators in Florida.
Oh really? That's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny.
So I might have actually known some of those alligators because I was alive then.
Wow, look at that. You know somebody famous from the Indiana Jones movies. I mean, it's alligators, but or are they crocodiles? They're probably crocodiles.
No, they're alligators.
Oh, really? Name an animal with 3 letters in its name. Alligator. You ever see that Family Feud bit? It's funny. Anyway,
I'll take your word for it. John Williams is a gift to film goers.
John Williams is a gift, yeah, to everything, to life. Thank God that he exists. I'm going to use that shirtless picture as the featured, by the way, just because it's ripped as hell. I'm just going to put our logo right on top of his face. Anyway, I derailed you. John Williams is a gift, you were saying?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, he does the Indiana Jones, he does Star Wars, he did Superman. I mean, there's so many things that John Williams does music for that is just
Yeah.
it's phenomenal.
I think we really, really talked about him on an earlier episode. I can't remember which one it was.
I'm sure we did.
But probably Jurassic Park. But I think every single time we watch a movie scored by him, we do talk a lot about him. And I think that in the future we're going to do an episode similar to our villains one, but about film scores and about music from film. And I have no doubt that he's going to appear at least once on that list.
Probably on your side.
Probably, but still, I don't even
But
know.
I like him too. Yeah.
But I would say he's one of the greatest composers in film history.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
If not in
easily,
music
yeah.
history, the period, all music, which is a big take, I know, but
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to pop culture, you can't separate him. It's like him
No.
and Ennio. Those are the two big ones.
yeah. Well, I would say the Star Wars theme and like the good, the bad, and the uglies motif or whatever, probably two of the most recognizable things of all time. Even if you don't know what they're from, you know the song, you've heard it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you wouldn't know why it's not from Star Wars. Like if you heard the Star Wars song and you don't know it's from Star Wars, you're ridiculous. But like so many people will refer to Western things that have not seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and will still do that little sound, right? It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, how people are. Wah, wah, wah.
But I love the music in this movie too, obviously. But I love the theme that he kind of did for Temple of Doom, the little, I guess, motif he created for this one.
Mhm.
I don't even know. Like, how does it go? It's the, like the dun, 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 dun. That one's so awesome. And again, it just gives me like Indiana Jones flashback. But because I played the first one,
It's like when you hear his music, you can't help but smile.
right? Exactly. I think John Williams, even if he scored a bad movie, the movie would be good because of him.
Well, I think the criticism that people have about John Williams is that he sounds like John Williams.
What you mean? Like all of his stuff kind of is the same, or what?
That he uses similar like structure and similar like arrangements.
So what?
Right, exactly. I mean, it's like saying that Clearwater Revival, you know,
Yeah,
like John
all of
Fogerty sounds like
Beethoven's
John
stuff
Fogerty.
sounds the same.
So, I mean, you know, it's just like that is his style. He has.
Why does a band have a
become
unique
something.
tone? I only like bands who every
Sure.
single song by them has a different fucking sound. Yeah, and I agree with you fully. It's kind of ridiculous that people have that criticism about him at all. He does what he does, and what he does it perfectly. That's a hell of a sentence.
Yeah, I agree with it.
What else we got for this one?
So, do you think with this being a prequel and with it being different than the other Indiana Jones that came out around the same time, do you think it is still successful? Like it did what it was intended to do?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think so. They wouldn't have made a third one if it wasn't successful and it didn't do what they wanted it to do. I don't know why. Like, I wasn't around for the reception of this one, but I don't know if it was well received when it was released, because they definitely did, like, in quotes, return to form with Last Crusade in a similar way to something like True Detective's first and third seasons are similar in tone, while the second is different. This is kind of the same. But I'm not sure if Temple of Doom was received poorly when it came out, and that's why they had a drastic turnaround and go back to what Raiders was for Crusade. But maybe you could shed light on that if you know.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a prevailing theory that once you get outside of like with the George Lucas Spielberg things, like once you get outside of the main part of the films, it kind of breaks down. Just like once you get past in Star Wars, once you get past the Darth Vader Skywalker story, it's not as interesting. It kind of breaks down. There's not a whole lot you can do within that world.
Sure.
And I kind of think that maybe the public perception of Temple of Doom was uh they wanted to go to a movie to have fun. I mean, and we have to remember too, this was like the 80s where Ferris Bueller's Day Off is like comedies were huge in the 80s. Buddy
Sure.
cop movies were huge. It's like the people didn't want to go to feel bad or to have any of those types of things. They wanted to have a good time. So I think maybe some of it was preconceived notions and this subverted expectations. And so it was let down. But I think critically looking back at it, it is the weaker of the trilogy
Sure.
for me.
I would agree.
And I could understand why people wouldn't maybe love it as much. But I also at the same time think maybe it was necessary for the first and the third to really stand out, because I think if the second one was the exact same as the first, I think the third would have been the lesser film because
would
they
have
were
been
just
repetitive.
just keep doing that same formula. And I like the fact that they were at least trying different things. Whether or not it was completely successful or completely worked for everyone is up for discussion. But I like the fact that they were trying different things and they were trying to build the character and they were trying to show different things.
Mhm.
And that's ultimately why the trilogy works, because you have the tonal differences.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you on that. It does have an 85 on Rotten Tomatoes and an 81 audience score, so
Yeah, I think people looking back on it probably
are more fond on it.
yes, because they didn't have the expectations going into it, and then
And
they
it is
can
fun.
watch it.
It's not like
Yeah,
dark, like Brazil dark or something.
no, and that's it gets over. I mean, it's
Like
still a PG.
it's a dark story. Sure, it's darker than Raiders, but is it though? That's the thing. Is it's inherently dark, I guess, because of the cult element and sacrificing people. But like Raiders has people's face exploding and all that.
Right, right.
Like this film ends still on a happy note, right? All the children are back with their families and everybody hugs and it has the happy swelling music. Like it's not like an Empire Strikes Back ending either, where it's like even that's sort of uplifting at the end, even though there's like still stuff going on wrong in the world. It's not a dark ending or anything. Like there's still the sort of hallmark fun throughout Temple. So I don't really get how people could have that kind of difference, but I also do because people are people. But yeah.
Yeah, if people really think that this is a dark film, they never need to watch anything that I love.
It's not. It is inherently darker than Raiders, I think. Just the story wise, sure.
Right.
Because, child slaves and all of that kind of elements are a little bit darker, I guess, than the Nazis. Maybe. But yeah, no, to say it's a dark film overtly it's not true.
Well, you went from cartoon villainy in the first movie, probably, to maybe something a little more substantial.
Sure.
Even though it's still comic book, serial Saturday morning type darkness. But I mean, bad guys are gonna bad.
Exactly. I think it falls relatively in tone with a lot of the stuff that came out around it. So I really don't see why it's hailed as the dark film. But it was instrumental in creating the PG-13 rating.
Right.
Which was interesting. Because Spielberg was actually fed up about how his films either had to be PG or R, and how easy it was kind of to get an R, I guess. He thought there should be a midpoint in between the two. And his quote was kind of like, I don't care, PG-13, PG-14, pick an arbitrary number, but maybe there should be another between kind of thing. So it did, and this one was rated PG, but Red Dawn, did Red Dawn come out the year after?
I don't remember.
I don't know, but Red Dawn is the first film to have a PG-13 rating. And I guess Spielberg and this film were instrumental in the creation of that rating as a midpoint, between what is acceptable for relatively all audiences and what is acceptable for just adults in quotation marks. Because if you just have PG and R, I think there's kind of a jump there, right? What would define a PG in that case, and what would define a G even if you just have PG and not PG-13? So I think that the 13 is quite important, I guess, in a certain way. But now PG's kind of gone the wayside. There's not a lot of PG films anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's like parents are just stupid.
Yeah, that is true.
No know your kids. Like Indiana Jones is obviously going to be a certain thing. The name Temple of Doom. If your kid is going to have nightmares by seeing something, don't take them to see this movie.
Temple of Doom. Yeah, you're right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where like, oh, it's a cartoon. I thought it would be okay. Well, no, this is Japanese anime and it had tits in it. You're an idiot.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Oh God.
It's a video game. How bad can it be? Are you kidding me?
Oh, but that's just people are dumb and they've always been dumb.
Mhm.
I think we're almost getting to the point where, and I don't know how much it would break it up. I feel like we almost need another rating now. I feel like we need a rating in between 13 and R, because there's so many R-rated movies that are like, so they don't need to be.
Well, that's the UK has that. They have a 15 rating and an 18 rating.
I don't see why we don't have that kind of rating system. I think UK's rating system is wonderful, but it beats me because they have what? They have like all audiences 7, 12, 15, I want to say 18, and then 19 or something like that. They're 19 being like are the equivalent of an NC-17, where it rarely happens. But it's pretty I don't see why we don't have something like that now, other than the fact that they just don't want to create another rating. It would kind of divide, I guess, a little too much. But there's so many R-rated films nowadays that could probably slide with like a 16.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever seen the documentary?
No, there's nowhere to watch it for me. I really want to watch it, but I haven't find it anywhere.
Yeah, no matter what you do, people are gonna be. I mean, the rating system doesn't even have. I mean, that's one of the things. Like, if this hadn't have been made by Spielberg, if someone else would have made it, they'd have slapped an R on it.
Yeah.
And then it's like if Titanic hadn't have been made by James Cameron, I mean, you know, they fully show tits, which normally is a no-no in a PG movie.
Right. Well, that was PG-13, Garrett.
Right, but I mean, PG-13, you know, it's like I think you can say the F word one time as long as you don't direct it at someone.
Manner. Yeah.
Right.
But like that's why I'm saying a 16 could work in a sense of there are a lot of R-rated movies. Like 8th Grade is rated R. It has 4 F words in it, and it's rated R.
Right, and you know the kids that are actually in 8th grade that can't see the movie, do way worse than that.
I swore like crazy when I was that age. So I'm not allowed to get into movies solely because it uses fuck 4 times. I've said fuck more than 4 times in this entire podcast, and we don't have a rating system on it. Bam. That's a different issue, but whatever. Not an issue. That's a different altogether. Anyway, it didn't make any sense.
You know, that's one of the things is that, you know, violence in the US, you can have a PG-13 film that's extremely violent.
Yeah.
You know, but it can't have any nudity whatsoever, and it can have hardly any language.
Yeah, because the children,
you know, and then but then like, you know, over in certain European countries, you can have nudity on TV.
Yeah,
it's not a deal whatsoever. But you can't have any.
Oh my God, the kid looked in the mirror and they saw a naked body.
You know,
it's ridiculous. So rating systems are ridiculous in general, but also important. But people are too stupid to realize why they're important or to use them effectively. I think
it's because in order to judge certain things like that, you have to have critical thinking skills. And in a country of low education and other people thinking for you, it's hard to have that.
Right. That is true. Not to get political or anything, but
no, but I mean, it's just a simple fact.
Yeah. And the more the population grows as well, the more stupid grows, I think.
Sure.
There's a lot more of the general population, I think, is a lot, I don't want to say dimmer, but I can't think of a less blunt way to say it at this time. Maybe that's the Canadian in me, is I like being blunt.
But it's like, you know, some of the rating system, it does border on censorship. And so those aspects of it I do not like.
Isn't this film is not yet rated as NC-17, even though it doesn't show much of the stuff. I thought it had just censored the other things from R-rated movies. And it censored them. But like, what could the MPAA not take criticism? So they slapped an NC-17 on it so that nobody would ever see it.
Almost like you'd have to watch it and find out.
Fuck off.
You know, it's like I think protecting children that don't know any better, and it's because of the lack of experience that they don't know any better, is a good thing. But I think holding back someone who is an adult and can die for your country is ridiculous.
Before they can drink, they can die for their country.
Right.
Yeah.
You can die for your country before you can drive a car legally.
Right.
And I think that is ludicrous.
You're absolutely correct.
You know, it's, and you can cut this out if you want, but you can make life-altering decisions in religion and get baptized when you're a little kid, but you can't choose what it is that you watch, what it is you listen to, or what it is that you do. And I think that's stupid.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I might not cut it out because they didn't say anything offensive or anything. Like,
I know, but some people do get offended by that. But it's like,
well, nobody's listening.
I just like consistency across the board.
Hey, if you're listening to this part and you are offended or you're not offended, either way, if you are offended or you aren't offended, leave us a comment and tell us if you are or aren't, because that would be great to know if you're actually listening.
No, I mean, to me, a lot of it is, if you're not allowed to criticize or discuss something, you can never progress.
Sure.
But being able to talk about things and figure things out and then come to a consensus or come to an understanding is an important thing. And so shutting down communication for anything, regardless of what it is, whether it's racist or bigot or whatever. I mean, it's like you should be able to say something and people go, no, that's a terrible idea. Don't do it. Or you can talk about something and you go, maybe we should try that. Maybe that's a different idea.
Well,
maybe
that's like
we should at least
free
talk about
speech
it
is
more.
okay. You're allowed to have free speech, but that doesn't mean other people have to listen or put up with it or anything like that. That's a lot of people preach free speech when they're doing hate crime stuff while people are getting mad at them. But it's like, no, that doesn't. Free speech doesn't mean that I have to listen to it.
Right. And it's like, people don't have to agree with everything. That's also a thing about free speech, you know.
But we need to have intelligent conversations about it rather than shoving it under the rug.
Shutting it down. Yeah, just saying, no, you can't talk about it.
Yeah, I 150% agree with you. Wow, what a good tangent off from just the Temple of Doom and Steven Spielberg creating PG-13 rating. Eh?
That's my.
It actually is. It's quite good. Like it was. Yeah, it makes sense. It does border on censorship, the MPAA and its rating systems, or its ludicrous thing. Because the MPAA, I'm pretty sure, is voted on by like, what is it? A bunch of fucking old white moms. I think it was the statistic that I read.
Yeah.
So of course they're fucking who don't even watch movies. Like of course they're gonna get apprehensive about certain things, right?
Well, yeah, and they keep it secret too, who it is.
Religious propaganda, like God's Not Dead, could be G, while something that questions it, just questions in general, lightly, not even says leans one way or another, but just like explores it without any bad content, can be R.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you have a movie without anything that has dealings with like a homosexual relationship, and they can slap whatever rating they want on that to. And the thing is, it's not even the fact of, well, that movie could still be released, but maybe because of the amount of money it gets because of the rating, discourages the studios to continue to produce that type of material.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they know they can't open it to so many things, or it's limited in the audience that it can get. And so they actually are pushing what types of films are being made based on what they will allow through.
I think that, especially R-rated movies do not make as much money. Just inherently. But that's also kind of a ridiculous argument too at the same time, because it does make a lot of money. Halloween made a lot of money. Those are both horror movies. Does that have anything to do with it? I don't know. Because there are R-rated movies that make a significant amount of money. Deadpool made a significant amount of money, as did number 2. But I don't know what it is. Is there certain trends? I think horror always sells if it appeals to a large market. Same with superhero films. But when you try to have something like different, like a Blade Runner 2049, whose runtime didn't help, but also the fact that it was R maybe helped, and also what it was maybe didn't help. But a lot of R-rated films, I think, don't make as much money as PG-13 films as well. But I think it's because some audience can be limited and cut off. Absolutely.
Well, it's like the Matrix was very mild, and it's an R.
Exactly. That's why, like, the Matrix is the perfect example. That would actually be PG-13 if it was. I think it would 100% be PG-13 if it was released now. There's nothing in it. There's no blood at all. There's no language. There's no sex or anything.
A little bit of blood, but
barely. Yeah. Not on any of the blood. Not on any of the gunshots or anything. There's no blood splurts or anything. So it would 100%.
I'm pretty sure there is a little bit.
We'll have to watch it again. I mean, maybe we could do a podcast on it. I'm just kidding.
Like the Godfather movie, barely R.
The Godfather has nudity in it.
Does it?
Yeah. And it has
Blues Brothers.
It has some pretty gory scenes in it. The Blues Brothers has nudity in it too.
No, it doesn't.
Anyway, The Godfather has gore as well. Whereas the horse head shooting the dude in the restaurant is kind of bloody.
Yeah, but I mean, come on. Just having blood? I mean, to me, it's like that's more realistic than shooting a guy and nothing coming out.
But That's the absurdity of the censorship, right? If you do something in a realistic way, it's deemed inappropriate, I guess.
Well, I mean, but kids are at school shootings. They're going to see way worse in person. Fucking America. God damn, I hate this place.
Oh, man. I think that the length of a movie doesn't matter as long as the movie is good. And I think that there's a very clear example of a film coming out in a couple of weeks that's going to prove that long films don't matter as long as they're good. That obviously is Avengers Endgame, which might have even some darker tones to it. Infinity War had some dark tones to it. This one might as well. People will die and they'll die permanently. And it'll be interesting to see if they die in a way like in Infinity War, spoilers, if you haven't seen this $2 billion grossing movie. Like when Loki gets choked out at the beginning of the movie, it's somewhat brutal, a little bit, at least in the realm of a Marvel movie. Like his face turns fully purple, his eyes are pretty much popping out of his head, and there's a snap sound when Thanos breaks his neck. Like, I'm wondering if there are movies, which there certainly are, with a similar kind of thing to them, that because they don't have the Marvel and Disney slapped on top are rated R, but they have that same kind of violence to it. What do you think?
That's why I only watch hard R.
That's why I only watch movies about two Japanese women scissoring each other.
Shut up.
I still have to watch that. Anyway.
That's why I buy physical media, so they can never take that off the internet.
Bingo. Anyway, do you have anything else for Temple of Doom before we go too far off?
Shorty just fucking burns people.
That is in my notes. Yeah, he literally just throws fire in people's faces. Like multiple
how did he know
people.
that would work?
He didn't. He just wanted to burn people. He's just he's a pyromaniac.
Here's my torch.
But he also, that was racist. But he also figuratively burns people as well because he's just ripping jokes left, right, and center at people too. It's hilarious. No time for love. That's the best.
I like how he has the blocks strapped to his shoes so he can reach the pedals.
Holy
Club
smokes!
Obi-Wan.
Club Obi-Wan is awesome. Yeah. Got anything else on Temple of Doom?
No.
All right. You can catch us down here, of course, at the Digital Drive-In every single week, where we talk about our favorite movies and why we love them and what makes them stand out from a lot of the trash that's out there nowadays. My name is, of course, Alex, and you can follow me on Twitter at Alex's Reviews. You can follow Garrett on Twitter at Garrett Gennardo, and you can follow the Digital Drive-In Show on Twitter at digital_podcast. If you're out there and listening, please do follow us on Twitter. It would help greatly in a lot of the stuff we're trying to get off the ground here. In addition, you can follow us on YouTube, or subscribe to us rather. Our channel name is Digital Drive-In. You should see our logo on there, as well as a lot of the podcast episodes. Give us a click, give us a listen there if you can. It would be greatly appreciated, as well as a subscribe and maybe a like or a comment if you like the show. It'd be greatly, greatly appreciated. Next week, we're going to, for the first time, we actually have something planned, don't we, Garrett? We're not just throwing for a mystery film for the third week in a row. Next week, we're going to look at a little bit different of a film, in that it is surreal and obscure and music related. And the band isn't obscure or anything. The band is very famous, but maybe you didn't know it had a movie to it. We're looking at Pink Floyd The Wall, which is a narrative film based on the world famous classic Pink Floyd album The Wall. So tune in next week for that one, and we'll catch you on the flip flop. Say goodnight, Garrett.
Good night.